So that moves us to 16, which is discussion of board policy DIE, fiscal auditing and audits, Exhibit H. Well, we've kind of moved on, right? I mean, yeah. It is going to be addressed at the next meeting because Ms. Huddle is bringing a letter. So in interest of time and the fact that we need to go back into executive session, I'm going to move forward, which brings us to discussion of board policy DIE, fiscal accounting and audits, Exhibit H. Dr. Ross.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, we are bringing for clarification. We are seeking clarification for the board. This is really no action on our board policy DIE for fiscal accounting audits. We heard from our auditing firm, and we just wanted to see for clarification as we read this policy. So I want to let our CFO, Ms. Madison Wilkerson, explain the clarification.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. As he mentioned, we have been, working with our auditing firm, Manley Garvin, for about 6 months now. They are still working on our FY22 and FY23 procurement audits. With that, and included in our discussions with them and in our engagement letter, we included the language from our board policy DIE regarding fiscal accounting and audits. This language was updated January 24th, 2022. And the language reads, purchasing audits will require the auditing of all payments of more than $50,000 total in any fiscal year to any vendor to ensure the procurement code was followed with respect to contracting and payments. This includes payments of all types, regardless of funds used for such payments and regardless whether purchase orders were used. These requirements will be included in all our requests for proposals and all proposed contracts for purchasing audit services. So again, that language was included in our engagement letter, and that is something that we, talked about on the front end. I think now that we're in the practice of it, we're really understanding what that policy means. So based on that, that language and in discussion with our auditors, we have looked at the years under question to see how many invoices this truly means. So just for understanding for fiscal year 22, which again, this first year this policy was in place, and the first year that clause has been included in a procurement audit, the district paid 144 vendors over $50,000 in total. Of these 144 vendors, 56 of those are subject to the procurement code. The other vendors are either exempt from the procurement code under a state contract, which means they already meet competition requirements, or were a sole source procurement. Of the remaining 56, the administration at this time estimates in excess of 5,000 invoices for these vendors. Again, this is an estimate at this time because the volume is pretty significant. One of our vendors alone has 1,600 invoices. Another vendor has 400. I've looked at several others that have a couple hundred apiece. So again, my estimate at this time is 5,000, but that is truly just an estimate. Looking at that one vendor that has over 1,600 invoices, over 400 of those invoices are for less than $100. So again, just a large volume. So based on the way the policy reads right now, we're looking for guidance as to what the board meant by that policy, because again, with that volume, that is excessive. But if we look at it a slightly different way, in the same time frame, if we pull only invoices over $50,000, so not total vendors paid more than $50,000, but the invoice alone is $50,000 or more, the result is about 172 total invoices, 86 of which are subject to the procurement code. So 86 is still certainly a robust sampling of our procurement policy and certainly our district internal controls, but it's much more manageable than the $5,000 if we interpret it the other way. So, again, at this time, Finance Administration and certainly mainly Garvin are just looking for guidance on what this clause of the policy truly means and what the expectation is of us.
Okay, any thoughts, Ms. Huddle?
Is one of their questions whether or not it just applies to the vendors, the payment subject under the procurement code, or is that probably a given? I mean, is that a clarification that is needed?
I think
No,
it's a
we took that as a
$50,000
given.
number.
So,
We took it that just applied to the procurement code as a
Correct.
given, so that's why I gave the different
Okay.
numbers.
I mean, three of us were on the board at the time, and I think the intention was that the vendor would get audited, not necessarily all the payments. So, because we had some vendors who had payments over $50,000, but there were problems with the contracts. Like, the contract was indefinite, which is not allowed, and the board had never approved it. So I think that was really the intention. I'm looking at these two over here.
I thought it was $50,000, like if there was one invoice that was $50,000, not all of the invoices.
It was not all of the invoices, but it was if the vendor had received more than $50,000, because this actually came out of the procurement committee and then went to the full board multiple times. But it was the vendor, and it actually stemmed from a contract. One of the things that it stemmed from was a contract with a consultant that was an indefinite term contract. The consultant had been paid over $50,000, and so that should have come to the board, and it never did. And the auditor didn't catch it because they weren't looking at that level. So I mean, I would think this would need to be adjusted, but I would propose that we talk about where it's, instead of saying all payments, it just says a sample of payments would be, because 56 is not hard to audit. That, you'd be only auditing 56 vendors and a sampling of payments to those 56 vendors.
So the reason why I'm saying the $50,000 with one person, and Matt, I mean, this could go back to like our very first board meeting or our second board meeting when we were on the board. So we're going back a few years, but I believe you made a motion, like we had our accounting firm here, Burkett, and you asked them about whether or not they looked at all invoices over $50,000, and they said yes. And I could be misremembering this. I'm thinking out loud, and you had gone through every single check, and you were like, no, here's an invoice for $50,000. And that's where the $50,000 number came from. From what I remember, and I could be remembering, I could be remembering it wrong. But when I think about the $50,000 number, that was significant to me because they came back to us and they said, our scope of work was to sample invoices, not to look at every single invoice. And it was the $50,000 number. Am I remembering that wrong, or do you remember that, Matt?
I'll tell you exactly.
I mean, I'm trying to get intent, because I think that's what the intent was, Matt. Do you?
Yeah, and I remember it. It was at Spring Hill High School where the meeting was.
Yeah.
I believe we got poinsettias that meeting.
And, Dr. Lofton had a full beard.
He did.
Yes.
But no, and I think my interpretation as well was it was transactions over 50,000 would be audited. But I mean, it's subjected to our interpretation as to kind of where
Well,
we
I'll
were.
just go ahead and remind y'all of what it was. Okay, there was a contract with a consultant that had never been approved by the board, which is required by the procurement code, or at least was at that time. It was a 710 exemption, that any consultants that were paid over $50,000 had to be approved by the board. It had not been approved by the board. The consultant had been paid over $50,000, and so I'm asking, well, why didn't the auditor catch this? And I asked, well, do you audit all vendors that are paid over 50? So the word paid could have been invoiced, but I will tell you, as being on the procurement panel at the time, the goal was to prevent that from happening again. So the goal was to look at vendors that receive $50,000 and not audit all of their invoices, but look at their contract to make sure it's in compliance, like was it approved by the board or whatever the proper approval was, and sample not all of their invoices. So my recommendation would be to just insert the word sample.
Okay. So we could kind of edit that for going into the first reading to admit. Mr. Satterfield.
Yeah, and I'm glad I wasn't around when you all went through all this. That's quite a lengthy board policy. I know it was necessary, though. Yeah, I talked with a friend of mine who is in the finance, and he said typically it's just a sampling. And that if we just took out the word all, then it would in fact be a sampling as an audit is typically, and that's how it's typically done. I think the word all just insinuates that all payments. So, just a suggestion.
Yeah.
Can
We may
I
wanna-
just ask a clarifying question? So on that, when you say insert the word sample, can you just tell me where to, because I just want to make sure I put it in the right spot.
I was looking at the language that you guys sent
Like
us.
purchasing audits will require the auditing of a sample of payments of more than 50,000.
Or just, as Mr. Satterfield suggested, just remove the word all. Will require the auditing of payments more than $50,000 in total to any fiscal year to any vendor.
And
Just
I
take-
think, yeah, I think.
that clarify that?
That would help clarify, certainly for us, because in our discussion, I said an audit is a sample, but then when you put the word all in there, it takes away the sample. So
yeah.
that's where our auditors were like, what do we do here?
All right,
So I guess the next step for that, because it is discussion, so y'all wouldn't be making a vote, so it'll go for first
For
reading the next
first
time.
reading, have
with
a
that
draft
adjustment.
of that, and we can discuss that at the next meeting. Dr. Ross wanted to say something, and then we need a motion for executive session, but Dr. Ross?
Thank you for the point of privilege. When we refer to our chiefs and the works that they do, when things go good, our chiefs give away all the thanks and praise. When things go wrong, they take all the criticism and the challenges, and they work very well, tirelessly behind the scenes to get things done. That has been true of this chief in her last meeting in School District 5. Ms. Madison Wilkerson, she has done an amazing job coming in, being just a rock for our financial department, handling the challenges we have, righting the ship, making sure that we're in a good, sound place with our fiscal responsibility. And we will certainly miss her, watched her in such a short time do an amazing job. And so Steve Wilson here at the Center for Advanced Technical Studies has a machine tool. He's a machine tools instructor, and he has his students fashion out a award that we give to those who've done a stellar job. It's called the Heart Work Award. And I would like, on our last meeting, she came in on a board meeting and she leaves on a board meeting. But board, please help us recognize an amazing chief as she moves
Dr.
forward.
Ross, can we meet out front like we recognize
okay,
other
yes.
folks and take a picture with her and
That's
shake her hand and
that's
tell
what
her
I
thank
was
you?
going. No, I wasn't, but thank you. That would be great. And recognize our CFO in our transition, Ms. Madison Wilkerson.
Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
You do. I'd like to make a motion that the board re-enter executive session to continue discussing matters.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Do I have a second? Mr. Satterfield, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? That motion carries 7-0. We will adjourn for executive session and reconvene. All right, I'm calling us back to order from executive session. Just a note for the public, the board is going to have a special called meeting on Wednesday, the 24th. The 24th at 11:30. It will be a virtual meeting to finish discussing the contractual matter in executive session that we discussed today. And with that, do I have a motion?
I'd like
Mr.
to make the
Hogan.
motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I was going to call on Ms. Barnhart, but I heard Ms. Huddle first. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? That motion carries 6-0, and we will adjourn until Wednesday. Thank you.